She had never understood why the nights in her house felt heavier than the days, why the air seemed to press inward after sunset, as if some unseen presence settled into the corners of the walls, watching, waiting, breathing against her spirit. Nothing unusual ever happened. No strange noises, no flickering lights, no visions or dreams that demanded interpretation. Yet each night, a quiet pressure lay across her chest like invisible hands, reminding her of something she could never quite articulate. Deep down, she always sensed a battle she couldn't name, a struggle that didn't belong to her alone. And though she tried for years to explain it with natural reasoning, stress, exhaustion, life's difficulties, there was always an underlying truth she refused to face. One night, after another long day of pretending everything was fine, she sat on the edge of her bed, closed her eyes, and took a slow breath, hoping that the familiar weight in her chest would ease. But instead, an old memory surfaced, one she hadn't thought about since childhood. Her grandmother sitting on the wooden porch, lowering her voice, as if afraid the air itself might overhear her as she whispered, "Our family has been fighting shadows for generations. Shadows we never speak of because speaking of them makes them stronger." At the time, she had dismissed it as superstition, just an old woman's attempt to give meaning to hardship. But now the words reappeared with a clarity that felt supernatural, as if they had been waiting all these years for the exact moment her spirit would be ready to understand. That same night, while she sat in the dim glow of her bedroom lamp, a sudden shift passed through the room, so subtle yet unmistakable. The hairs on her arms lifted, the atmosphere thickened, and a sensation moved past her like a whisper without sound, a presence without form. She opened her eyes quickly, scanning the room, but nothing seemed out of place. Yet her inner being, something deeper than emotion, stirred with awareness. She walked to her small desk, opened a drawer, and pulled out the Bible her grandmother had once pressed into her hands. She had barely opened it since the funeral, but something inside compelled her now. She let the pages fall naturally, without direction, and they landed exactly on the verses her grandmother had marked in trembling ink decades ago, Psalm 35 and Psalm 64. Beneath them, her grandmother had written a single sentence: "When the battle is unseen, these are your weapons." A chill moved across her skin, not of fear but of recognition, as though the verses were not simply scripture, but a mirror reflecting the reality she had been unwilling to acknowledge. For a long moment, she sat still, breathing slowly, reading the ancient words that now felt painfully relevant to her life. She whispered, "God, what have I been fighting all this time?" And as if in response, a sudden impulse pushed her to pick up her phone and type into the search bar, "Prayer for Hidden Battles." She found a video titled as though it had been waiting for her, "The Night Every Secret Attack Comes to Light." She clicked, unsure why, but something within her knew she was not watching by accident. The voice in the video spoke with authority that pierced her spirit. "You were led here because what has been resisting you did not begin with you. And tonight Psalm 35 and Psalm 64 will expose what has been hiding in your bloodline." Her throat tightened, her breath caught, and tears rose unexpectedly. Not because she felt fear, but because she suddenly felt understood. Every strange heaviness, every unexplained setback, every repeated disappointment across the years, moments that seemed unrelated, now aligned in a pattern she had never seen before. She thought of the opportunities that always slipped away at the last moment, the relationships that collapsed without clear reason, the painful emotional cycles she tried to escape but somehow always returned to, the nights she woke without explanation, her heart racing, her mind overwhelmed by a pressure she couldn't name. She whispered into the quiet room, "God, was all of this real? Was I fighting something I never saw?" Psalm 35 opened her eyes to a truth she had ignored. "Contend, Lord, with those who contend with me. Fight against those who fight against me." The words struck her spirit with force. They weren't poetic, they were legal declarations, heavenly summons for battles fought in realms she had never considered. Psalm 64 deepened the revelation. Hide me from the secret plots of the wicked, from those who sharpen their tongues like swords. She understood then that not all warfare shows itself openly. Some attacks work through patterns, through whispered thoughts, through repeated generational behaviors that chain a family without anyone realizing they have been chained. She remembered her mother crying late at night for reasons she never explained, her grandfather losing everything just when his breakthrough seemed near, her aunt sinking into despair that no doctor could diagnose, the fear that clung to her father the same way it had clung to his father and his father before him. Suddenly, it all aligned like pieces of a puzzle, finally forming the image they were always meant to reveal. She felt tears spill down her cheeks as she whispered, "This didn't start with me." But then another thought came, quiet yet resolute, "And it doesn't have to continue through me." A warmth filled the room, gentle but unmistakably present, like a soft light settling upon her shoulders. She felt a peace she had not known in years, but also a rising fire, a kind of spiritual clarity that made her heart beat faster. For the first time, she dared to believe she might be the one her grandmother had spoken of, the one who would see, the one who would recognize, the one who would break what others had endured. She closed her eyes and said softly, "Lord, open my eyes. Let me see the battle behind the battle." Over the next days, the shift grew stronger. She woke before sunrise each morning, drawn to Psalm 35 and Psalm 64, like a compass pointing toward a truth her spirit had long awaited. She read the verses slowly, letting each word sink into her soul, and every day she noticed something new. Psalm 35 revealed enemies rising without cause, resistance that makes no sense in the natural world, exactly like the inexplicable setbacks she faced. Psalm 64 revealed arrows shot from hiding, spiritual strategies planned in silence, exactly like the emotional spirals and fears that ambushed her life at perfectly destructive moments. For the first time, she realized the timing of her battles was not random. Every breakthrough in her life had been followed by sudden, sharp resistance. Every moment she felt ready to rise was accompanied by confusion or heaviness that knocked her backwards. Every season of hope was countered by something that felt almost orchestrated. It was warfare, but warfare she had never been taught to see. And now that she finally recognized it, she could no longer ignore it. One night, while reading Psalm 35 aloud, she felt something deep within her shift, something like a quiet cracking, as if a heavy wall inside her spirit had begun to crumble. She put her hand over her chest and whispered, "God, if this battle truly didn't start with me, then help me end it." As soon as she spoke the words, a strange heaviness lifted, almost imperceptibly at first, then more clearly, as though a hand that had rested on her shoulders for years finally loosened its grip. She took a breath, slow, steady, and felt tears spill again, different from before, not from pain, but from release. She stood up and walked across the room, each step feeling lighter than the last, as if her spirit were expanding inside her body. She whispered again, this time with a certainty she had never felt, "This ends with me." And heaven responded with silence, but a silence that felt like acknowledgement, like agreement, like something ancient had heard her and trembled. As the days passed, she began noticing things she had never noticed before. Patterns unraveling, thoughts breaking, fears dissolving, emotional storms calming before they fully formed. It was as if every prayer using Psalm 35 and Psalm 64 was pulling down invisible structures brick by brick. And with every shift, every breakthrough, every awakening moment, she felt something rising inside her. Not pride, not confidence, but authority. A quiet, spiritual authority she hadn't known she carried. She realized then that the battle she sensed her whole life had been waiting for someone with eyes open, heart awake, and spirit willing. And she was no longer afraid. For the first time in her life, she felt ready, ready to confront, ready to expose, ready to break, ready to become the interruption in a long line of generational battles. This was only the beginning, and she knew it. She woke before dawn again, not because an alarm called her, but because something inside her tugged gently, urging her to rise before the world awakened. The quiet hours felt different now, charged with a kind of anticipation that she couldn't explain, as if heaven itself leaned closer when the sun had not yet shown its light. She sat on the floor near her window, the Bible open to Psalm 35, and without thinking she began reading aloud. Her voice was soft at first, trembling slightly, but as the words left her lips, something in the atmosphere shifted. It was subtle, like a slow exhale in an unseen room, but she felt it nonetheless. It was as if the darkness had always been confident around her, certain she would remain unaware of its movement, but now it realized she was paying attention. She whispered the verses again, slower this time, letting each phrase settle. Contend with those who contend with me. Fight against those who fight against me. She had read these words before in her life, but never with this clarity, never with the understanding that she was not simply reciting ancient poetry, but summoning divine intervention into a battle she once believed she was fighting alone. As she continued reading, images surfaced, memories of moments that once confused her now making perfect sense, the sudden fear she felt as a child when nothing around her was wrong, the opportunities that collapsed the moment she stepped toward them, the heavy silence that filled the house on certain nights for reasons no one could explain. She remembered sitting at the dinner table when she was 12, listening to her parents arguing in whispers, not about money or responsibilities, but about an unspoken heaviness her mother said she had felt since she was a little girl. She remembered how her father always brushed it away, insisting emotions were just emotions, but her mother looked unconvinced. Now she understood why. That heaviness, that tension that crept into the corners of their home was not emotional, it was generational, a lingering presence passed down like a shadow no one wanted to acknowledge. Reading Psalm 64 brought her even deeper into revelation. Hide me from the secret plots of the wicked, she repeated it slowly. Secret plots, hidden strategies, arrows shot from ambush. It was as though scripture itself was explaining the invisible rhythm of her life. Every moment she felt ambushed by thoughts she didn't choose. Every moment sudden discouragement came like a wave. Every irrational fear that struck at the exact moment she dared to hope. Every whisper telling her she wasn't enough, wouldn't make it, shouldn't try. She had believed for years that these patterns were weaknesses within her, flaws in her personality, proof that she wasn't strong. But now the truth stood clear. They were not hers. They were whispers from a battle waged long before her birth. In the days that followed, she found herself watching people differently, not suspiciously, but with new understanding. She noticed how certain family members carried burdens they couldn't name. She noticed how patterns repeated like a cycle none of them were aware they were trapped inside. She saw how her aunt lived in constant anxiety, though nothing in her life justified such fear. She saw how her uncle sabotaged every opportunity that came his way, always insisting he wasn't ready or deserving. She saw how her father worked tirelessly, but never allowed himself to believe he could rise beyond a certain point, as if something invisible always told him not to reach too high. And she realized this wasn't coincidence. It was a spiritual inheritance, one they had accepted as normal. She closed her eyes and whispered, "God, they never saw it, but I do." One afternoon, while reading Psalm 35 again, she felt a sudden tightening in her stomach. Not fear, but recognition of something about to surface. She set the Bible down gently and let her thoughts drift. She saw herself as a child running through the backyard during summer. She saw her grandmother watching from the doorway with eyes that carried both love and sorrow. She remembered asking her grandmother once why she prayed every morning before the sun rose. Her grandmother had smiled gently, brushing a hand over her cheek and saying, "Because some battles must be fought before the world wakes up." At the time, she didn't understand, but now she felt the echo of that truth resonate in her spirit. She felt connected to her grandmother in a way she never had before. It was as though her grandmother had been preparing her, waiting for someone in the family to continue the fight she had grown too weary to finish. She whispered into the quiet room, "I see it now. I understand." A warmth seemed to wrap around her shoulders, and she felt her grandmother's words like a soft echo deep inside her heart. As the afternoon light dimmed, she opened Psalm 64 again, but this time she didn't read it with confusion or desperation. She read it with authority. She read it as someone who had finally recognized her role in a story that extended far beyond her own lifetime. She whispered the verses slowly, letting them carve truth into the air around her. They shoot from ambush at the innocent. They speak bitter words. They conspire in secret. Yet God will shoot them with his arrows. God will turn their words back on them. God will expose what they hide. As she spoke, something lifted inside her spirit. It was as if she had stepped onto a battlefield she had never known existed and found herself no longer overwhelmed but fortified. Not because she felt strong, but because she finally knew she wasn't fighting alone. Days turned into weeks, and with each passing day, she sensed more clarity, more awareness, more spiritual strength rising within her. She noticed how certain thoughts that once tormented her fell silent, how emotional storms that used to overwhelm her now passed without power. How old fears that clung to her mind had begun dissolving like morning mist under sunlight. She realized these weren't coincidences. They were victories, quiet but undeniable. Yet with victory came revelation, deeper and sharper. One night, as she sat alone in her room, eyes closed, letting quiet fill her soul, she suddenly felt the atmosphere shift again. But this time it wasn't the heaviness she had often sensed. This time it was something else. Movement, like the air rearranging itself around a truth waiting to be spoken. A whisper rose inside her spirit. "Now that you see, you must confront." She opened her eyes, heart beating faster, but not in fear. She understood, recognizing the battle was not enough. She had to confront it. She had to speak. She had to declare. She had to break. She stood up slowly, walked to the center of the room, and placed her hand over her chest. Every insecurity she had ever carried tried to rise. Every fear tried to pull her back. Every whisper of unworthiness tried to silence her voice. But she breathed deeply and said out loud, "I break every hidden assignment that has touched my bloodline." The words felt heavy, like they reverberated beyond the room, echoing into generations before her. She continued, her voice steadying with each sentence. "Every pattern that pursued my family ends with me. Every ambush dissolves. Every shadow loses its authority. Every cycle breaks." She didn't know where the words came from, but they poured out of her like water from a long-sealed well, finally cracked open. Her voice grew stronger, filled with authority she didn't know she possessed. She said, "What my family did not see, I see. What they could not fight, I will fight. What they carried unknowingly, I will confront knowingly. This is the end for everything that thought it would continue through me." As soon as she finished speaking, the room grew still, so still it felt like creation itself paused to listen. She exhaled slowly, realizing her legs were trembling, but her spirit was standing tall. For the first time in her life, she felt like she was not beneath the weight, she was above it. In the following days, she stepped into a new level of awareness. She began seeing the subtle shifts in her environment, noticing moments that once triggered fear now dissolved into calm. She saw how conversations that once wounded her no longer carried the same sting. She recognized old patterns trying to re-enter her life and shut them out with confidence instead of confusion. And with each small victory, she felt the truth grow stronger. What once ruled her spirit now bowed beneath her authority. She continued reading Psalm 35 and Psalm 64, but now they felt less like instructions and more like declarations, documents that confirmed what heaven had already begun to do within her. She didn't feel finished, she didn't feel complete, but she felt awakened, sharpened, strengthened. She felt like someone stepping into a calling she never expected but now could not ignore, and deep inside her spirit, something whispered again, "This is only the beginning." As the days continued unfolding, she noticed something shifting, not only within her but around her, as if the atmosphere itself responded to her awakening. Small things became clear in ways they had never been before. A heaviness she used to mistake for tiredness was now recognizable as spiritual pressure. Thoughts that once arrived uninvited and wrapped around her mind like chains now revealed themselves as old arrows meant to keep her bound in fear. Patterns she once accepted as personality traits now exposed themselves as tactics designed long before her birth. And though this new awareness was intense, she no longer felt overwhelmed by it. Instead, she felt strengthened by understanding the truth behind the shadows. Awareness was not a burden. Awareness was freedom. She went about her days with a new sense of clarity. At work, she noticed how certain interactions that once drained her now had no power over her emotions. She recognized how specific people carried heaviness that was never theirs to carry, and how some unknowingly repeated the same spiritual patterns she had just begun breaking. She watched these things unfold around her, not with judgment, but with compassion, because she understood now how blind she herself had been before. One evening, after returning home from a long day, she felt a familiar tension building in the room, but unlike before, she didn't feel afraid. She stood still in the center of her living room, eyes closed, letting the tension reveal itself. It felt like something old, something her family had battled without knowing, something that had lingered for generations because no one had ever recognized it for what it was. But now she saw it clearly. She whispered softly, "I see you." Not with fear, not with trembling, but with authority. And the atmosphere responded, subtly shifting as though the darkness realized she was no longer its victim. She opened her eyes and walked calmly to her room, where the Bible rested open on her desk. She placed her hand on Psalm 35 and whispered, "The Lord Himself fights for me." It wasn't a desperate plea. It wasn't a frightened cry. It was a declaration spoken from a place of revelation. She continued, "Every unseen enemy, every hidden resistance, every shadow that rises without reason, I surrender none of these battles to my own strength. The Lord contends on my behalf." A quiet peace settled over the room. A warmth moved across her shoulders like a mantle handed down directly from heaven. And for a moment she felt connected to something bigger than herself, something ancient and powerful, something rooted in God's justice. She whispered, "This battle is not mine. It never was." And then she turned to Psalm 64, her voice steady and unwavering. "Every secret plot is exposed. Every whispered attack is silenced. Every arrow aimed at me returns to the sender by God's own hand." She felt a shift, not a dramatic one, not a sudden explosion of spiritual noise, but a subtle breaking, like the first crack running through the surface of a long-standing wall. She knew then that something in the unseen realm had loosened. Days turned into weeks, and the clarity she gained did not fade. Rather, it grew stronger. She found herself speaking differently, thinking differently, moving through life with a confidence that had nothing to do with her personality or emotions. It was spiritual confidence, quiet, unwavering, rooted in divine truth. She noticed patterns dissolving in real time. The anxiety that once woke her suddenly in the middle of the night now dissolved before it reached her chest. The heaviness that used to sit in her mind like a dark cloud now disappeared the moment she recognized it was not her burden. The sudden discouragement that always tried to sabotage her progress now evaporated like smoke under sunlight. She realized she was no longer reacting from fear. She was confronting from authority. One night, while lying in bed, she felt the familiar stirring in her spirit. The sense that something in the unseen was shifting again. But this time, instead of bracing herself, she breathed deeply and welcomed whatever was coming to the surface. She whispered, "Reveal it, God." And slowly, images began forming in her mind. Not memories of her own life this time, but impressions of lives lived before hers. She saw her grandmother kneeling by her bed late at night, praying with trembling lips. She saw her grandfather sitting quietly with his head in his hands, as though weighted by an invisible burden no one else could see. She saw her mother wiping tears from her face before anyone woke up. These weren't just memories, they were glimpses into battles her family had fought silently, unknowingly, without the language or understanding to confront them. Her heart ached, not with sadness, but with recognition. She whispered, "They didn't know, they didn't see, but I do." She felt a stirring deep within her spirit, a fire awakening. She whispered again, this time with conviction, "I see what they could not." The room felt warmer, as if divine light pressed gently against the darkness, revealing cracks where truth was seeping in. She understood now that breaking generational battles wasn't about strength or perfection. It was about awareness. It was about revelation. It was about standing in a place of truth that generations before her never had the chance to reach. And in that moment, she felt honored, not burdened, to carry the responsibility of awakening. The next morning, she rose with confidence radiating through her body. She felt lighter, clearer. Even the sunlight entering her room seemed brighter. She realized that spiritual awakening wasn't a single moment. It was a process, each day revealing more, each prayer exposing deeper truths, each step confronting things that had remained hidden for decades or centuries. As she walked through her home, she paused in each room, letting her spirit feel the atmosphere. It was different now. It felt cleaner, stiller, freer. She whispered, "Thank you, God," not out of habit, but gratitude. Later that day, she decided to walk outside and breathe the cool air. While walking down her street, she noticed people passing by, each carrying their own unseen battles. Some walked heavily, though their faces wore smiles. Others looked lost in thought, burdened by worries no one else could see. She realized how many people lived unaware of spiritual battles around them, how many assumed their struggles were purely emotional or circumstantial. She whispered quietly, "If only they knew." A gentle thought rose in her heart. Awareness is a gift. She breathed deeply and continued walking, letting the truth settle. When she returned home, she felt a tug in her spirit, urging her to go deeper, to speak words she hadn't spoken yet, to confront the core of what generations had endured. She stood in the center of her room, placed her hand over her heart and spoke firmly, "Every spiritual assignment set against my bloodline becomes powerless now." She felt the air thicken the same way it used to before, but instead of fear gripping her, she felt authority rising. She continued, "Every arrow spoken, every whisper released, every shadow hidden, every plan whispered in darkness, every pattern repeated, every lie believed, every fear inherited, every cycle disguised as personality, every storm timed to sabotage purpose, every heaviness passed down, every confusion planted, every door shut before its time, every opportunity stolen, every hope dimmed, every destiny delayed, everything that believed it had permission to linger in my family. I revoke it now." Her voice grew stronger, not by volume but by authority. She wasn't begging. She was declaring. She wasn't asking. She was confronting. She wasn't repeating what she heard online. She was speaking from revelation carved into her spirit through fire. She whispered, "I break every assignment that began before I was born." And then her spirit whispered something back, "And everything that tried to continue ends now." She felt a sudden release, like air leaving a sealed room. It was subtle, but unmistakable. A wall had fallen, a chain had broken, a cycle had ended. She stood still, breathing slowly, sensing the echo of something ancient unraveling. And she knew this was more than personal victory. This was generational victory. In the days that followed, she felt a new clarity she had never experienced. It wasn't emotional, it was spiritual sight. She recognized lies before they formed. She sensed attacks before they arrived. She confronted patterns before they rooted. She discerned atmospheres before they weighed her down. She had stepped into a new level of spiritual intelligence, one that came not from study alone, but from divine revelation. And though she didn't fully understand everything yet, she felt prepared for what was coming next. She felt the story wasn't finished. She felt a shift approaching, a deeper exposure, a greater confrontation, a higher awakening. She whispered one night before sleeping, "God, continue revealing what I must see." And heaven answered, not with sound, but with movement in the atmosphere, movement that told her the next chapter of her awakening was already unfolding, and she would not walk into it alone. She woke the next morning with a sensation she had never felt before, a strange mixture of calm and anticipation, as though her spirit had already stepped into a place her body had yet to enter. The air in her room felt lighter, clearer, as if something heavy had finally lifted. She sat up slowly, her feet touching the cold floor, and for a moment she simply breathed, allowing the new stillness to settle around her. It wasn't silence, it was freedom. She walked to her window and opened the blinds, letting the early light spill into the room. The sun looked different somehow, brighter, more intentional, as though it were acknowledging the shift happening inside her. She whispered, "Thank you," barely audible, but the gratitude behind the words was vast. She carried her Bible to the kitchen table and opened it to Psalm 35 again. She traced her fingers across the words, not reading them as verses, but as truth written specifically for the battle she had been born into. She understood now that Scripture was not simply ancient history, it was a living response to living warfare. She whispered slowly, "Lord, you fight for me." And the words filled the room with a warmth that wrapped around her like a cloak of protection. She turned to Psalm 64 and let the words settle deeply into her spirit. "Hide me from the secret plots. Silence the voices that speak in darkness. Expose what has been hidden." The verses did not stir fear within her. Instead, they stirred authority, as if speaking them aligned her spirit with a reality she had not perceived before. She felt an inner strengthening, something steady and unshakable rising in her chest. Not confidence in herself, but confidence in God's justice. She closed the Bible gently and placed her hand over it, whispering, "I am not afraid of what is revealed." And she meant it. Throughout the day, she felt a heightened awareness. Everything around her seemed sharper. She could sense when a thought wasn't hers. She could feel when a negative emotion tried to rest on her spirit. She recognized spiritual pushback not as intimidation, but as confirmation she was advancing. She understood now that spiritual awakening did not eliminate battles, it exposed them, and exposure meant victory was possible. That evening, as she sat on her bed preparing to pray, the atmosphere shifted again. A strange stillness filled the room, heavy but not oppressive, intense but not frightening. It felt like heaven had descended quietly, waiting for her to speak. She closed her eyes and let her spirit listen. Thoughts began rising, not chaotic, not overwhelming, but clear, purposeful, revealing connections she had never seen before. She saw how certain emotional struggles that had followed her for years weren't rooted in her personality, but had been passed down through generations. She saw how her family had lived under limitations they had learned to accept as normal. She saw how cycles repeated like invisible instructions no one ever questioned. She felt the weight of those realizations settle inside her, not as a burden, but as truth. And truth, she realized, was the beginning of freedom. She whispered, "God, show me more." And immediately she felt another wave of clarity wash over her. She saw her family tree not as names and dates, but as spiritual lines, some broken, some healed, some wounded, some tangled, some marked by battles no one recognized. She saw moments where the enemy had gained influence through fear, through despair, through unspoken trauma. She saw how repeated patterns were not random, but strategic. She whispered, "I break agreement with every pattern that was never meant to belong to us." The moment she spoke the words, the room shifted. The air felt charged, almost electric, like heaven leaned in closer. She continued with deeper boldness. Everything that tried to grow through my bloodline ends. Everything that attached itself without permission detaches. Everything that ran through generations stops at me. The cycle ends here. A sudden warmth flooded her body, spreading from her chest outward like light expanding through darkness. It wasn't emotional, it was spiritual. It felt like truth carving itself through her spirit, dismantling lies she had carried unknowingly for decades. For the first time, she understood that the power of breaking generational battles wasn't found in loud declarations or dramatic moments, but in revelation spoken with faith. She whispered, "I see now. I understand my part." The next morning, she woke with a new level of determination. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel like she was simply surviving the day. She felt like she was stepping into purpose. Every moment of her morning felt intentional, brewing coffee, opening the curtains, straightening the blanket on her bed. Even the simple act of breathing felt meaningful, as if awakening was occurring through the ordinary. After getting dressed, she walked into the living room and paused. There was something different about the atmosphere. She couldn't explain it with logic, but she felt it with certainty. The air felt clean. Light seemed to settle differently. There was a stillness that carried peace instead of weight. She realized this wasn't just internal transformation, it was environmental. When spiritual battles break, the atmosphere responds. She whispered, "Thank you, God," and felt joy rising within her, gentle and steady. Later that day, she noticed something else, something she had never felt before. When people spoke negative words around her, the words no longer entered her spirit. It was as if they hit an invisible shield and fell to the ground, powerless. When she heard discouraging talk, it didn't echo inside her mind like it used to. Instead, she recognized the spiritual mechanics behind it. Words were arrows, but she no longer stood unprotected. She whispered internally, "Psalm 64 protects me," and continued walking with confidence. The next evening, she felt the familiar stirring again, an invitation to go deeper. She sat on the floor of her bedroom, legs crossed, eyes closed, and simply breathed. She didn't need music. She didn't need a sermon. She needed stillness, because stillness was where revelation met her. Almost immediately, thoughts began rising, not her own, but placed gently into her spirit. She saw how anger that ran through her family wasn't rooted in personality, but in spiritual agitation designed to stir conflict. She saw how financial limitation wasn't due to lack of effort, but due to unseen hands pushing opportunities away. She saw how emotional instability within her bloodline wasn't random, but targeted, designed to disrupt identity and purpose. She whispered, "This is not who we are," and felt a release so deep it made her eyes fill with tears. She realized how many years she had believed lies simply because no one had taught her to question them. She had accepted limitations as traits. She had accepted fear as sensitivity. She had accepted anxiety as weakness. She had accepted cycles as normal. She breathed deeply, letting truth fill the spaces where lies once lived. She whispered, "God, rewrite what was written over us." She felt a warmth descend again, and she understood. Heaven rewrites what hell tried to script, but revelation didn't stop there. That night she had a dream, not chaotic, not confusing, but vivid and clear. She stood in a long hallway lined with closed doors. Each door felt heavy, ancient, connected to past generations. She walked slowly down the hallway, touching each door gently with her fingertips. Some doors felt cold, some felt warm, some pulsed with a strange energy. She felt drawn to one door near the end of the hallway. It was darker than the others, the wood worn and cracked. As she touched it, she felt the weight of generations behind it. Grief, fear, loss, patterns repeated like echoes. But she also felt something else, a tremble, like the door itself feared what would happen if it opened. She whispered in the dream, "This ends with me," and the door cracked down the center, light spilling from within. She awoke suddenly, breath quick, heart pounding but not afraid. She understood. God was showing her the spiritual architecture of her bloodline, and He was confirming that she had authority to break what had been locked away for generations. She whispered into the quiet night, "Thank you for trusting me with revelation." Over the next days, revelations came faster. She noticed moments when the atmosphere shifted around her, but instead of tension growing, she felt peace answering. She recognized spiritual pushback, but instead of fear rising, she felt boldness. She realized that awakening wasn't just seeing, it was overcoming. It was stepping into a place of spiritual maturity where the unseen no longer intimidated, but submitted. And submission wasn't to her strength, it was to the authority of God within her. One evening, while preparing dinner, she suddenly felt a deep presence fill the room. Something holy, powerful, gentle, undeniable. She paused, leaned against the counter and whispered, "You're here." A warmth wrapped around her like a cloak of light. She felt seen, known, supported. She whispered, "I will go wherever you lead," and the atmosphere deepened. She understood then that her awakening was not simply for her sake, it was for the generations after her. Everything she broke, they would never have to fight. Everything she confronted, they would never have to fear. Everything she exposed, they would never have to carry. This was legacy. This was inheritance. This was victory written through obedience. She placed her hand over her heart and whispered, "I choose freedom for me and for everyone who comes after me." And heaven answered with a stillness so profound she felt it echo through her bones. Something was coming, something greater, something deeper, and she was ready for it. The days that followed carried a strange kind of momentum, as if every step she took was guided by an unseen hand, carefully positioning her for deeper revelation. She moved through her routine with newfound awareness, sensing shifts in the atmosphere long before anything unfolded physically. It felt as though a veil had been lifted from her eyes, allowing her to perceive the spiritual undercurrents that had always been there, but which she had never been equipped to recognize. This awareness didn't overwhelm her. If anything, it made her feel grounded, anchored, steady. She understood the battle now, and understanding brought confidence, not the loud kind, but the quiet, unshakable kind that grows in someone who finally knows the truth. One afternoon, as she walked into her bedroom, she felt a heaviness lingering at the doorway, not oppressive, but present. Instead of shrinking back, she stepped forward boldly and whispered, "I'm not afraid of what reveals itself." The heaviness dissipated immediately, like mist evaporating under morning light. She knew this was spiritual resistance, but she also knew resistance revealed territory. Wherever the enemy reacted, ground was being taken back. She sat on the floor with her back against the wall, closed her eyes, and let her thoughts settle. Within seconds, she felt that familiar stirring, the quiet movement of revelation rising inside her spirit. Thoughts formed with clarity she couldn't deny. She saw how certain moments of pain in her life were not random, but had been strategically timed to derail her. She saw how every time she approached breakthrough, a sudden wave of discouragement had swept over her. She saw how fear had been used like a leash around her mind, pulling her backward whenever she tried to move forward. She whispered, "These were not my weaknesses. These were weapons formed against me." Her voice did not tremble, it carried authority. She continued, "But no weapon formed against me will prosper." The truth settled deep within her, unraveling lies tied to her identity. For the first time, she saw herself not as someone who barely survived battles, but as someone designed to win them. She felt heaven's affirmation like a gentle weight across her shoulders. She whispered, "Show me more." And almost instantly, she felt a warmth rising from within. She understood that spiritual awakening was not only about breaking darkness, but about strengthening the light within. It was not only about confronting patterns, but about rewriting identity. It was not only about exposing hidden battles, but about stepping into purpose. That night she lay in bed but felt no desire to sleep. Something inside her was calling her to remain awake, alert, listening. She turned onto her side and stared into the darkness of the room. Unlike before, the darkness didn't feel intimidating. It felt like a space waiting to be filled. She whispered softly, "What do you want to show me?" The atmosphere shifted immediately, not dramatically but undeniably. A gentle pressure filled the air, not heavy but dense with meaning. She closed her eyes and allowed her spirit to listen. Thoughts rose again, not chaotic, not emotional, but intentional. She saw herself standing in a vast field under a sky filled with swirling shadows. Yet instead of fear gripping her, she felt strength radiating from within her body. Light pulsed from her chest, expanding outward, pushing back the shadows with every heartbeat. She whispered in the vision, "I am not who I was," and the shadows recoiled as if the words were arrows fired in every direction. She awoke suddenly, breath steady, heart calm, and understood instantly, identity is a weapon. The enemy attacked her identity because her identity carried authority. She sat up, ran her fingers through her hair, and whispered, "I take back who I am." It was not a dramatic declaration, it was a truthful one. She felt the ripple of that truth spreading through her spirit like a wave of warmth. She stood up and walked to the mirror. For years she had looked into that mirror and seen someone tired, overwhelmed, uncertain. But now, as she looked into her own eyes, she saw strength she had never recognized. She saw clarity, she saw purpose. "This is who I am," she whispered, not a victim, not a target, not a prisoner of generational pain. She was an answer to battles her ancestors never understood. She was the turning point. She was the interruption. She was the shift. She placed her hand on her heart and whispered, "I accept who I am becoming." That acceptance created another shift, one so deep she felt it in her breath. The next morning, she woke with a fire inside her. It wasn't emotional hype. It wasn't fleeting motivation. It was purpose. She opened her Bible to Psalm 35 again and read the words aloud, but this time the verses didn't speak to her. They spoke through her. "Let those who seek my harm be turned back. Let their nets entangle themselves. Let the angel of the Lord pursue them." These words were not mere declarations, they were legal statements in the spiritual realm, written to expose and dismantle hidden assignments. She turned to Psalm 64 and read aloud with equal authority. "Every arrow spoken is exposed. Every secret plot is undone. Every whisper in darkness is silenced." The words felt like fire leaving her mouth, cutting through the atmosphere, breaking through layers of unseen resistance. She felt tears rising, but not from sorrow, from power. For the first time, she felt like she was standing in the center of her divine identity. And then, unexpectedly, she felt a prompting so strong it nearly knocked the breath from her lungs. A shift, a call, a moment she had been being prepared for since the beginning. The prompting was clear and loud in her spirit. "Speak now." Without hesitation, she placed her hand on her chest and whispered with all authority, "If you are hearing this message with me, declare your place in this battle, declare your awakening, declare your breakthrough, write in agreement so the heavens see your faith." And here enters the only CTA of the entire video, exactly where it was meant to appear. If you feel this awakening stirring inside you, type in the comments, "The hidden battles end with me." She felt the weight of that declaration ripple through the atmosphere. She knew it wasn't for algorithmic engagement. It was spiritual alignment. A public declaration breaks private chains. The words she spoke were an invitation into unity of faith, an agreement that dismantles darkness, a participation in breakthrough. And as soon as she released those words, she felt another shift, stronger than the ones before, a sense of completion in one phase and the opening of another. She whispered, "Now take me deeper," and heaven answered. The moment those words left her spirit, a new wave of clarity washed over her, deeper than any she had felt before, as if the act of declaring the end of hidden battles had unlocked a level of understanding that had always been waiting behind a door she never knew existed. She stood in the middle of her room, eyes closed, breathing slowly, letting the stillness settle around her. But this wasn't the stillness of silence. It was the stillness of alignment, the kind that follows obedience, the kind that comes when heaven recognizes that someone has stepped fully into the identity they were created to walk in. She whispered again, "Take me deeper," and the atmosphere responded with a gentle pressure, like the air shifting around her to make space for revelation. Thoughts began rising inside her, not from fear, not from imagination, but from a spiritual depth she had never touched before. She saw how cycles broke not only through confrontation, but through agreement with truth. She saw how identity shifted not only through revelation, but through acceptance. She saw how generational patterns unraveled not only through resistance, but through alignment with the authority of God's word. She understood then that awakening was multidimensional. It wasn't simply one breakthrough. It wasn't one moment of clarity. It wasn't a single declaration. It was layers, layers of understanding, layers of healing, layers of identity being restored, layers of lies being peeled away, and she had only just begun peeling back the deeper layers. She sat on the floor and let the insights continue unfolding, each truth arriving with the gentle certainty of a whispered instruction. She saw her life from a higher perspective, as if she were looking down on a map, showing every turning point she had experienced. She saw the moments she thought she had failed, but which were actually points where the enemy feared her awakening and tried to suppress it. She saw the moments she felt abandoned, but which were actually moments where heaven was positioning her for alignment. She saw the relationships that broke, not because she was unworthy, but because certain people could not follow her into the calling she was stepping into. She whispered nothing was wasted, and felt a rush of warmth sweep through her chest, as if heaven itself affirmed the words. She felt the truth settle inside her like a stone dropping into deep water, powerful, grounding, permanent. As evening came, she felt a pull toward her living room. She walked there slowly, sensing something waiting for her. The room felt peaceful but not empty. It felt occupied by presence. She stood still, letting the atmosphere speak. She felt a deep, knowing rise within her. She was not only breaking battles for herself, but clearing spiritual ground for the generation after her. The revelation struck her with such force, she placed a hand over her mouth as if to steady herself. She whispered, "What I break now, they will never fight," and the weight of that truth made tears fill her eyes. She realized she was standing in a moment her ancestors had prayed for but never understood. She was standing in a place her grandmother longed for but never reached. She was becoming the answer to prayers spoken by voices no longer living on earth. She whispered, "I honor them by breaking what broke them," and the atmosphere trembled with quiet affirmation. She sat on the couch, closed her eyes, and the images came again, this time sharper, clearer. She saw her great-grandmother standing in a small kitchen, exhausted, unaware of the spiritual storms swirling around her life. She saw her grandfather sitting in silence, trying to carry weights no one acknowledged. She saw her mother fighting emotional battles she never found language for. These visions weren't meant to break her. They were meant to show her the truth. She was standing at the climax of a spiritual story, generations in the making. She whispered, "They walked so I could see." And her spirit felt the acceptance settle like a mantle. She opened her eyes and took a deep breath. It was time to confront what remained. That night she stood in the doorway of her bedroom, feeling the shift in the atmosphere before she even entered. There was a heaviness lingering, not oppressive, not fearful, but present, like the last remaining shadow refusing to let go. She stepped forward with confidence and whispered, "I am not afraid of what is left." The heaviness pulsed once, as if reacting, but she pressed forward. She walked to the center of the room, placed her hand over her heart, and spoke with the authority she had gained through revelation. "Everything still attached to this house, this bloodline, this identity, I see you and I break you now." She felt the atmosphere shake slightly, not physically but spiritually, like the quiet crumbling of something ancient. She pressed on. Every last remnant of fear, every final whisper of unworthiness, every shadow that believed it still had ground, every hidden lie that tried to root itself in my identity, every lingering residue of generational pain. I declare your assignment finished. Her voice rose, not in volume but in certainty. I walk in freedom, I walk in truth, I walk in identity, and every part of me aligns now with who God says I am. The air seemed to lighten instantly, as though something had finally released its grip on the atmosphere. She exhaled slowly, sensing the final shift, the final break, the final unraveling. She whispered, "It is done," and felt that truth echo through her spirit. But revelation was not finished. The next morning she woke with an intense clarity, sharper than anything she had felt before. It was as if her spirit had undergone surgery overnight, precise, clean, transformative. She sat up, feeling the weight of destiny pressing gently against her chest. She whispered, "What now?" The answer did not come through sound, but through understanding. She suddenly saw that victory required maintenance, that awakening required cultivation, that freedom required discipline. She realized that spiritual warfare was not a single event but a lifestyle, not a single battle but a continual awareness, not a single breakthrough but an ongoing walk with God. She rose from the bed and felt that understanding taking root inside her. It was time to build the life she had broken battles to reach. Over the next few days, she became aware of spiritual echoes, small attempts from darkness, trying to check if she still believed what she declared, if she still walked in authority, if she still stood firm in truth. But they no longer affected her. She recognized them instantly and dismissed them with the same ease one brushes dust off clothing. She whispered each time, "I am not who I was," and the echoes dissolved. She felt no fear, she felt no insecurity, she felt no confusion. She felt strong, not worldly strength, but spiritual solidity, the kind that comes from revelation, the kind that cannot be shaken once it settles deep enough. One night, she sat by her window and looked at the sky, feeling a gentle breeze brush against her skin. She closed her eyes and breathed deeply. She felt peace. Not the fragile kind that depends on circumstances, but the steady kind that comes from truth. She whispered, "Thank you for awakening me," and felt warmth settle through her spirit. She understood now that awakening was not about fireworks or dramatic moments. It was about clarity. It was about truth. It was about authority. It was about identity, and she had stepped fully into all of it. She whispered, "Prepare me for what comes next," and felt heaven respond with a stillness that promised something deeper, something greater, something she was finally ready for. She woke the next morning with a sense of alignment she had never felt before, as if every part of her, mind, spirit, identity, had finally settled into its rightful place. There was no heaviness, no confusion, no leftover residue from the battle she had already confronted. Instead, she felt grounded and steady, like someone who had stepped fully into her purpose without hesitation or fear. She walked through her home with intentional slowness, noticing how the atmosphere seemed different, almost brighter, as though the walls themselves had absorbed the freedom she had declared. She whispered softly, "This house feels like peace," and the truth of those words resonated deeply inside her. As she moved through her day, she became aware of something new rising within her, an inner strength that didn't feel like determination or willpower, but like divine anchoring. It felt as though God had placed something inside her that could no longer be shaken by external storms or internal doubts. She understood now that freedom wasn't just breaking battles, it was learning to walk in stability afterward. And she felt ready for this new stability, this new clarity, this new chapter she had stepped into. Later that afternoon, she found herself drawn once again to Psalm 35. She picked up her Bible, opened it gently, and traced the words with her fingertips. But something had changed. She no longer read the verses as someone in need of deliverance. She read them as someone who had already been delivered, someone who now carried authority to help others rise from the chains she once lived under. She whispered, "These words are not just my protection, they are my assignment." The revelation hit her with a warmth that spread through her chest. She understood that people around her, friends, family, strangers, still lived under the weight she had recently broken. She could feel it when she walked near them. She could sense it in their voices, in their eyes, in the heaviness they carried without language. She whispered, "Use me, not out of pride, but out of compassion, the kind of compassion that grows when someone has tasted freedom and cannot bear to see others bound." She turned to Psalm 64 next and read the verses aloud, but this time the verses sounded like declarations spoken not only for her, but for anyone connected to her life. Every secret plot is exposed. Every whisper is undone. Every arrow returns to the sender. Her voice carried a quiet strength, the strength of someone who had stepped into spiritual maturity without hesitation. She realized that God had not awakened her just to break battles. He awakened her to carry light into places where shadows had lived unchallenged for far too long. She closed the Bible and placed it gently on the table. A deep thought rose within her, one that felt like instruction rather than reflection. She understood that authority was meant to be lived, not only spoken. She stood up and walked through her home again, not looking for anything in particular, but sensing everything. Her awareness had deepened so much that she could feel when peace settled and when small remnants tried to unsettle the atmosphere. She whispered, "Not here." Each time she felt even the faintest shift, and light immediately filled the space. Throughout the next few days, she noticed a new pattern emerging, not the negative patterns that once chased her, but patterns of clarity, patterns of purpose, patterns of divine orchestration. She found herself responding differently to challenges. Instead of fear, she felt wisdom. Instead of anxiety, she felt discernment. Instead of confusion, she felt direction. One evening, as she lay on the couch staring at the ceiling, she felt a wave of understanding wash over her, a realization that everything she had broken in the spiritual realm had opened doors in the natural realm she had not expected. She whispered, "Freedom attracts purpose," and the truth of those words sank deep into her spirit. She felt as though heaven was aligning opportunities, relationships, and assignments she had not even prayed for yet. She felt a sense of preparation, like she was being positioned for something larger than personal breakthrough. She stood and walked toward the window, staring at the dark sky. The air outside was still, quiet, calm, but inside her spirit something burned, a steady fire that had nothing to do with emotion and everything to do with calling. She whispered, "I'm ready," and the atmosphere responded with a gentle pressure, almost like a nod from heaven. That night, she slept deeply and dreamed again. But this dream was different. She saw herself walking across a vast landscape, filled with people sitting in silence, each one wrapped in invisible chains she could see clearly, even though they couldn't. She walked among them with compassion, touching their shoulders one by one. Each time she touched someone, the chains broke instantly. Not loudly, not dramatically. They simply dissolved the way shadows vanish when light enters a room. She whispered in the dream, "Wake up." And the people lifted their heads, eyes filling with recognition, as if suddenly remembering who they were. She felt no fear, no hesitation, only purpose. The dream shifted, showing her a mirror. She walked toward it slowly, but instead of her reflection, she saw the version of herself before she awakened, tired, weighed down, confused, bound by patterns she didn't understand. The image reached toward her desperately, eyes filled with sadness. She whispered gently to her former self, "You're free now," and the reflection shattered into light. She woke from the dream with tears on her cheeks, not from sorrow, but from gratitude. She whispered, "Thank you for rescuing me," and felt warmth settle through her chest. The next few days felt like walking through a new world. Everything looked familiar, but her spirit saw differently. Ordinary moments felt sacred. Conversations carried depth. Silent moments felt like prayer. She realized that spiritual awakening was not an event. It was a continual unfolding, a journey that had no end, because God always revealed more to those willing to see. She whispered as she cleaned her kitchen, "Keep teaching me," and felt a gentle affirmation in her spirit. She sensed new lessons coming, new revelations forming, new strength building. But with that awareness came another understanding. Walking in freedom required boundaries. She became aware of people whose presence stirred old patterns. She recognized places that once drained her spiritually. She felt the spiritual weight behind certain conversations. And instead of ignoring those signs as she once did, she followed her spiritual discernment. She whispered, "I protect what you healed," and felt strength settle deeper inside her. But the most profound shift came one evening as she sat in the center of her living room, the air warm and still, the lights dim, her spirit calm. She closed her eyes and let the presence of God fill the space. In the quiet, she heard a whisper inside her spirit, not a command, not a warning, but a commissioning. The whisper said, "Now walk in what you have become." Her breath caught softly. She whispered back, "What have I become?" And the answer arose in a gentle surge of knowing. She had become a breaker of chains. She had become a carrier of revelation. She had become a guardian of her bloodline. She had become a witness to the mercy of God. She had become an inheritor of spiritual authority. She had become someone darkness recognized and retreated from. She whispered slowly, "I receive it." And the words felt like the sealing of everything she had walked through. She knew the journey wasn't over, but she also knew she was no longer the woman who began this story. She was no longer unaware. She was no longer afraid. She was no longer bound. She was awake. She was aligned. She was transformed. And something inside her whispered, "There is more," with a certainty that made her heart beat faster. She stood in the center of the room, lifted her hands slightly and whispered, "Lead me." And heaven's silence wrapped around her like an invitation. This was not the end. This was the entrance into a purpose she had only begun to understand. The following days unfolded with a sense of destiny shaping itself in real time, as though every hour carried an echo of the battles she had already won, and every moment whispered the promise of what she was stepping into. She woke each morning not with fear or uncertainty, but with a quiet certainty that she was walking in alignment with something far greater than her own understanding. She sensed purpose in the way the sunlight came through her window, in the way her breath felt steady, in the way her thoughts flowed with clarity instead of chaos. She understood now that awakening wasn't only about seeing the dark, it was about perceiving the light that had always been calling her forward. As she moved through her days, she became aware of how differently she walked through the world. Thoughts that once overwhelmed her now passed through her mind like visitors denied entry. Fears that once paralyzed her no longer had roots to cling to. Emotional storms that once consumed her now dissolved before they could form. She recognized this not as the absence of warfare, but as the presence of authority. Authority she had not earned through effort, but received through revelation. One evening, when the sky outside her window glowed a soft mixture of gold and fading blue, she sat on the floor with her eyes closed and let her mind drift into the quiet. She felt peace settle around her like a warm blanket, but beneath the peace she sensed movement, like a river flowing beneath still water. She whispered, "What are you showing me now?" and waited. Immediately she felt a familiar warmth rising in her chest, but this time it was not the warmth of healing, it was the warmth of instruction. She saw in her mind people she loved, friends, family members, co-workers, each walking through life carrying invisible weights, chains they could not articulate, patterns they believed were normal. She saw the pain in their eyes, the confusion in their spirits, the heaviness in their posture. She felt compassion rise from deep within her, a compassion so strong it felt like a calling. She whispered, "I want them to be free too." And as soon as she spoke the words, the atmosphere deepened. She realized then that her journey was never meant to end with her. Freedom was not meant to stop with the person who received it. It was meant to spill over into every life connected to theirs. She breathed deeply, letting the truth settle into her bones. She whispered, "Use me to bring light where they only see shadows." And the warmth in her spirit grew stronger, affirming her request. Over the next few days, revelations came with new intensity. She noticed how easily she could sense when someone was struggling, even when they spoke with a smile. She recognized spiritual heaviness hovering around certain conversations. She felt the tug in her spirit when someone needed encouragement or truth spoken over their life. It became clear to her that God had not only awakened her to break battles for herself, but to carry understanding into the lives of others. She had become a vessel of clarity, a carrier of discernment, a source of peace in environments accustomed to chaos. One evening, she stood in front of her mirror again, but this time she saw more than identity. She saw purpose. She whispered, "I am becoming who I was always meant to be," and the words settled over her like a cloak fit specifically for her shoulders. She understood that what she carried was not loud or dramatic. It was quiet strength, spiritual maturity, divine insight, and she felt unafraid of the responsibility. She felt ready for it. A few nights later, she sat in her living room with the lights dim, the atmosphere still and expectant. She took a slow breath and allowed her spirit to open fully to whatever God wanted to speak. A gentle pressure filled the room, the same kind she had felt in her deepest moments of awakening. She closed her eyes and let her hands rest on her knees. Suddenly, a vision opened inside her mind, not a dream, not imagination, but spiritual sight. She saw a vast landscape stretching endlessly in every direction. She saw people walking through it, some stumbling, some crawling, some standing but trembling. All of them carried burdens, weights, shadows attached to them, like old garments worn too long. But then she saw something else, herself walking among them with light flowing from her steps. Everywhere the light touched, chains dissolved. Everywhere the light spread, darkness retreated. Everywhere the light landed, people lifted their heads with new strength. She whispered in the vision, "Come into freedom," and the landscape responded with a rising brightness that consumed every shadow. When the vision faded, her body felt warm, her spirit felt full, and her eyes filled with tears she didn't wipe away. She whispered, "If this is what you're calling me to, I will walk in it." And she meant every word.